34 different starting quarterbacks in the history of the NFL have won a Super Bowl. As you might expect, most of them were really good at what they did, but there are outliers, and whenever you're talking about ranking something, there always has to be the bottom part of the list or the worst of the list. And that's why in this video, I'm going to look at the 10 worst quarterbacks to ever win a Super Bowl. Dan Marino, you better shield your eyes because this might give you massive depression. The video begins right after this. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Their team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating better every day easy. Wherever tomorrow takes you, be ready with pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. You'll have over 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie smart, vegan, and veggie, and more. And there's even more to enjoy with over 55 nutrition-packed add-ons that help make your weekly meal planning even more delicious. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. Factor is also flexible for your schedule. Get as much or as little as you need by choosing 6 to 18 meals per week. Plus, you can pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. This isn't just lip service. I have been using Factor for a while now. They have plenty of options to make it easy to stick to my goals. They're a go-to lunch and dinner solution if I'm on the run or I'm busy. I've said it in all the other ads that I've done for Factor, and it's 1000% true. They are the real deal. They have my complete and total endorsement, so if you're on the fence about it, you shouldn't be. They are legit. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code BARRY50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Once again, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code BARRY50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Number 10, Joe Flacco. What is there to say about Joe Flacco? Is he elite? Is he not elite? Well, at least for the month and a half of early January 2013 and February 2013, he sure as hell played like he was elite. No matter what he does the rest of his career, despite winning Comeback Player of the Year just this season, everybody will always remember him for his 2012 playoff run where he led the Ravens to a Super Bowl championship over the San Francisco 49ers. Hey, the 49ers have been losing Super Bowls for decades now. Isn't that great? In that Super Bowl run, he threw 11 touchdowns with no picks, with a little help from Raheem Moore. Capped off in the Super Bowl with a 3-touchdown, no interception performance over the Niners, where he won Super Bowl MVP. Flacco has never made a Pro Bowl, and after signing his massive contract in 2013, which was a result of his 2012 playoff run, he never came really close to being a good quarterback ever again. But still, he's carved out a respectable career, so I can't really put him any higher than the 10th worst. But I still wonder what the hell got into him all those years ago for those couple months in order to win that Super Bowl. He must have sold his soul to the devil. The 9th worst quarterback to win the Super Bowl, Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson, another guy who had a respectable career and even had some good seasons, made the Pro Bowl. In the year he won the Super Bowl, 2002 with the Buccaneers with their legendary defense. He had 22 touchdown passes to 6 interceptions and had good numbers, but his playoff run wasn't really anything to write home about. He completed just over half of his passes with 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions with a 79.9 rating. He was able to avoid being sacked a lot, just once in 3 playoff games, but he obviously got massive amounts of help from his defense, which had 4 pick sixes combined in the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl versus the Raiders. A solid quarterback, but one that still makes you go, how the hell did he win a Super Bowl? The 8th worst quarterback to ever win the Super Bowl, Joe Namath. Some people would probably expect Namath to be ranked a little bit higher on this list just because of his raw numbers. Now, I did take era into account, and the fact that Namath's entire legacy and Hall of Fame status is really based off of one game, Super Bowl III versus the heavily favored Colts, where he was steady, throwing for over 200 yards in a 16-7 win. That was the last playoff game Joe Namath ever won in his career. When you look at his numbers, obviously he threw a lot of interceptions. He led the league in interceptions 4 times. He led the league in touchdown passes once and passing yards twice. Now, his numbers and best seasons all usually came early in his career in the AFL, so a little bit of a Mickey Mouse stats there. He also dealt with a bunch of injuries, so it's not entirely his fault that he didn't have better career numbers. But because of his durability problems and the fact that after the Jets merged with the NFL in 1970, he only had 1 or 2 good years. As a pure thrower of the football, though, he was an awesome thrower. And he also had lots of premarital sex. The 7th worst quarterback to ever win the Super Bowl, Mark Rypien. Rypien kind of reminded me a little bit of Joe Flacco. He began his career in his mid-20s on the Redskins of the 80s, a team that had already won 2 Super Bowls to that point, so he came in with some expectations to win and some good teams. Rippon's career basically can be separated into 2 parts, before 1991 and after 1991. In 1991, he had one of the best seasons ever at avoiding sacks with an all-time great offensive line, putting up historic efficiency numbers, while the Redskins went 14-2 and absolutely beat the fuck out of everybody. For my money, the 91 Redskins are probably the most underrated team in NFL history because Rippon was their quarterback and because they never came close to duplicating a type of dominance with Rippon at quarterback. After 91, Rippon pretty much quickly fell off into irrelevancy, but there was a moment in time, like his first 4 seasons, which culminated in Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 26 over the Bills, that he might look like a very, very good quarterback. It didn't turn out that way, but hey, he'll always be able to say that he got a Super Bowl ring and Super Bowl MVP for a game in which he threw for 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, with 1 interception and an adjusted net yards per attempt of 8.7, which is pretty darn good. He's also an incredible woman respecter. Just Google it. The 6th worst quarterback to ever win the Super Bowl, Doug Williams. Is it a coincidence that we have back-to-back Washington quarterbacks from the 80s on this list? Williams started out as the savior for the Buccaneers early in his career as a high draft pick out of Grambling, and he did a pretty good job of winning games for such a terrible franchise. Unfortunately, his career numbers weren't that great, and he went to the USFL for a bit. He came back after Joe Gibbs gave him another chance and backed up Jay Schroeder, who had led the Redskins to the NFC Championship game in '86, where they got destroyed by the Giants. The next season, Williams would get his chance when he got subbed in for Schroeder for the playoffs, and even though he was solid, not great, in their first 2 victories in the postseason that year, it's his Super Bowl win versus the Broncos that he'll always be remembered for, when he threw for 340 yards and 4 touchdowns with a 128 passer rating, including leading the Redskins to a 35-point second quarter, becoming the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. He'll always have that on his resume, but compared to the other Super Bowl winning quarterbacks throughout NFL history, he falls on the lower end. The 5th worst quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, Jim McMahon. If I'm being honest with you, if I know anything from studying NFL history, it's that the 1980 Chicago Bears should have had a dynasty, or at least won more than just 1 ring, because their defenses were unbelievably insane. Unfortunately for the Bears, the only time in the 80s they were able to combine that incredible defense with great quarterback play was in 1985, when McMahon was actually healthy in the postseason. And as you can tell by his career games played, the guy was fragile as shit. He stayed healthy for all 3 playoff games and had really, really good playoff numbers, which culminated in a 36-point blowout win in the Super Bowl versus the Patriots. I really wish they had to play Miami in the Super Bowl that year. It would have been awesome to see Marino versus the Bears defense again. But that would be the only Super Bowl McMahon ever made as a starter. He has an unbelievable career win-loss record because he was one of those guys that was just blessed with incredible defenses everywhere he went. Even after Chicago, those Philly defenses he had were no joke. But his career numbers are mediocre as hell. As I said, he couldn't stay healthy. You couldn't depend on him. He was just an okay quarterback who had his moment in the sun, but not much more than that. The 4th worst quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, Jim Plunkett. The only player on this video list to win multiple Super Bowls. Take a deep breath, Eli fans. I didn't include him, although I was. Plunkett had a incredibly unspectacular regular season career, despite being the first overall pick out of Stanford in the early 70s by the Patriots. Patriots dumped him because he stunk. He went to the 49ers, who eventually dumped him because he stunk. And he wasn't even officially the starter for the Raiders when he first got there, but he seemed to find a home, and in the 1980 playoffs, after surviving a terrible game versus the Chiefs, he was on fire in the AFC Championship game and Super Bowl, winning Super Bowl MVP in 1980. Several years later, he had probably the best regular season of his career in '83, which again culminated in his 2nd Super Bowl win, although this time Marcus Allen was the Raiders' best player offensively. But Plunkett did what every game manager is supposed to do, just don't fuck up too badly. And outside of 2 picks versus Seattle in the AFC Championship game, he played pretty clean football. It was enough to get him 2 rings. If there was anybody to compare him to, it would certainly be Eli Manning, because of the first overall pick, because they played forever, because they won 2 Super Bowls, despite the fact they weren't really that great quarterbacks. But Manning did have more respectable seasons than Plunkett did, and also Manning was way more durable than Plunkett was, even accounting for era, so Manning gets left off this list barely, and Plunkett wasn't so lucky. But I'm sure he doesn't give a shit. He's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He's just as good as Peyton Manning. The 3rd worst quarterback to win the Super Bowl, Nick Foles. God, this one cuts deep. Nick Foles has one of the weirdest careers in sports history. In 2013, just his 2nd year in the league, he had a historically efficient season, throwing 27 touchdowns to 2 picks with a 119 passer rating. He also played well in the playoff game, which the Eagles lost, and it looked like he might be a star. But then injuries hit. He got traded to St. Louis and then to Kansas City and then back to Philly, where nobody gave a crap about him until Carson Carson Wentz went down late in 2017. And after barely squeaking by Atlanta in the divisional round, where Foles played okay, not great, not good, something happened where Foles had one of the best 2-game runs any quarterback's ever had, throwing for a combined 6 touchdowns to just 1 interception, which was pretty fluky in the Super Bowl. He helped take down Brady and Belichick, not just with his arm, but with his hands, even catching a touchdown on the famous Philly special. He won over the hearts of Philly fans everywhere. So he has an all-time great season, regular season, on his resume. He has an all-time great Super Bowl run and Super Bowl MVP performance on his resume over the greatest dynasty the sport has ever seen, and yet he still ranks this highly because his career numbers outside of 2013 are garbage. In fact, he's never started more than 12 games in any season, and he's only reached double-digit starts in a season twice. I don't even know how to describe that. All I know is I'm thankful that he was healthy enough to play those 2 weeks versus the Vikings and the Patriots in early 2018 to help my team get its only Super Bowl win, but the Hall of Fame is not going to be calling for Nick Foles anytime soon. The second worst quarterback to ever win the Super Bowl, Jeff Hostetler. Hostetler is somewhat similar to Foles in that he kind of came into the league pretty unceremoniously. He was Phil Simms' backup, including on the 86 Super Bowl winning Giants team, and for the first 5-6 years of his career, didn't do anything and really see any important action besides spot duty. But Phil Simms got hurt late in the 1990 season with the Giants as a title contender, and big old Hoss had to take over, and the Giants played Iowa Hawkeye brand football, conservative as fuck, with a great defense coached by Bill Belichick and led by Lawrence Taylor, who's such a class act. Hostetler's job was to just not fuck up, and that's what he did. He had a great game versus Chicago in the divisional round, a blowout win for the Giants. The biggest test would come versus the 49ers in the NFC Championship game that year, the defending 2-time champions looking for a three-peat. The game is most famous for being the last game Joe Montana ever started for the 49ers when he got hurt, injured late in the game, thanks to a late Roger Craig fumble. Despite a pretty bleh performance from Hostetler, no touchdowns, no picks, the Giants were able to squeak out a 15-13 win thanks to 5 field goals. Hostetler made some nice plays though throughout the game, but this was not an example of a guy putting the team on his back. Shout out to Greg Jennings. The Super Bowl came around, and we all know how the game ended. Scott Norwood kicking it wide right to give the Giants a 1-point win. Hostetler, again, was very, very solid. Not great, but just not terrible either, and that's really all the Giants needed him to be. He threw a touchdown pass and had a 93.5 rating. After 1990, he and Simms would fight for playing time a little bit. Then he got traded to the Raiders and had some pretty respectable years, actually, towards the end of his career, even making a Pro Bowl, showing that had he gotten a chance earlier on a different team, he maybe would have had a much more decorated career, but probably not a Super Bowl, as he was a game manager who fell just shy of 100 career touchdown passes. And finally, number 1, the worst quarterback to ever win the Super Bowl, Trent Dilfer. This should come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. It's not just the fact that Trent Dilfer, career-wise, had a really crappy career despite making the Pro Bowl in 1997. He finished his career with 113 touchdowns to 129 interceptions. The thing about Dilfer was that everybody knew he sucked, even his own team. That's why the Ravens went out of their way to do their best to make sure that he did not fuck it up for their all-time great defense. In fact, in 4 playoff games, the Ravens defense gave up 16 points. And Dilfer, to his credit, in the limited amount of pass attempts they gave him, threw just 1 interception in 4 playoff games, and even had some really respectable raw numbers, although if you actually watch the film, it's pretty obvious that he wasn't that guy. All you need to know is that the Ravens won the Super Bowl in blowout fashion with Trent Dilfer at the helm, and immediately after the game, they said, hey, we got to get better at quarterback. Outside of a nice touchdown throw to Brandon Stokely in the first quarter, Dilfer really didn't do much, and probably should have had a pick 6 that was overturned on a crappy call. Would the Ravens have won more Super Bowls had they not gotten rid of Trent Dilfer? I don't know, because the Brady era was soon upon us after 2000. But I do know that Dan Marino must be absolutely beside himself when he thinks that this motherfucking scrub has more Super Bowl championships than he does.